At my mom's funeral, my husband leaned near, grabbed my wrist, and whispered via his tooth, "Get home now, or I'll drag you again myself." Anyone round us heard him. That became the moment something inside me broke. I stood there beside my mom's coffin, seeking to hold my tears from falling again. My mother, Grace M. Bell, had been my first-class friend. She had fought an extended illness, and that I had sorted her until the very quit. She always stated, "You deserve peace, Amahle," but peace becomes something I hadn't acknowledged for years. Not given that marrying Tawanda Okoro, Tawanda becomes status right beside me in his dark, healthy, pretending to appearance respectful. However, I may want to feel his impatience, his jaw become tight, his eyes darting across the room like he turned into counting the mins, until he may want to leave. When my aunt commenced studying a quick poem, he sighed loudly, muttering, "How long is this going to take?" Some people grew to become to examine him. I felt my belly twist. Once I failed to answer, he leaned in near, his breath sharp with coffee and anger, and said it again, louder this time. "Get domestic now, or I'll drag you again myself." His hand clamped around my wrist. I saw the greatly surprised faces of human beings nearby. My cousin, my mom's vintage neighbor, even the pastor. My aunt gasped softly. My face burned with disgrace. I pulled my wrist free, trying not to make a scene, despite the fact that each a part of me desired to scream. The funeral persisted in silence, but I slightly heard something. All I could hear turned into the echo of his voice in my head, that chance disguised as authority. Tawanda had always been like that. To absolutely everyone else, he gave the impression of a hardworking guy, a good husband who furnished for his family. But at home, he was bloodless, arrogant, and cruel in small, constant methods. I remembered the primary time I met him. He changed into fascinating, confident, the kind of guy who regarded to recognize what he desired. However, through the years, that confidence turned into control. He determined what I wore, who I talked to, even how long I stayed at paintings. Whenever I tried to push back, he'd snort and say I used to be being too emotional. Now status over my mother's casket, I found out she had seen this lengthy earlier than I did. She once informed me, "Weak but clean. He would not love you, sweetheart. He simply loves having electricity." I hadn't wanted to agree with her. But looking at Tawanda that day, his impatient scowl, his hand clenched in a fist, I knew she were right all alongside. Whilst the carrier ended, Tawanda walked immediately to the car without saying a phrase to everyone. Human beings prevented my eyes, pretending no longer to have heard. I stayed at the back of a bit longer, touching the threshold of the coffin, whispering goodbye. Something internal me changed that day. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, cold, steady. For the primary time in years, I didn't sense scared of I felt something stronger, something that become ready, affected person, and certain. I failed to know what I'd do yet, however, I knew this. He had subsequently long passed to some distance. After the funeral ended, Tawanda walked directly out of the church. He did not look ahead to the burial or speak to all and sundry. He simply driven open the heavy doorways and left, his shoes scraping on the steps. Everybody saw him cross. I stood there frozen, watching the door he disappeared through, feeling an atypical emptiness unfold interior me. My aunt came over and wrapped her fingers round me. "Honey, do not permit him, disenchanted you," she whispered. However, her voice felt far away. Humans spoke soft phrases, presented meals, said they had been sorry. I nodded at them, but I did not simply listen. It became like the entirety round me become underwater. After a while, when anybody started heading to the cemetery, I stayed behind. I looked at the plant life across the coffin, the framed photograph of my mother smiling in her garden. I attempted to cry once more, but not anything came. I felt whole, like someone had taken all of the air out of me. While I stood there, little memories stored flashing through my mind. Tawanda's voice telling me what to wear, saying shiny colors did not fit me. Him checking my telephone, asking who I used to be texting, the time I desired to go to my friend in Nakuru, and he said it was too far for a married female to drive by myself. I had believed it become simply his manner of being concerned, of defensive me. Mother had visible it in another way. She'd warned me so many times. "He would not love you, Amahle," she'd stated one evening after Tawanda left the medical institution in a horrific temper. "He owns you. There may be a distinction." I'd informed her she turned into overreacting, that he just desired the excellent for me. Now standing in that silent room, her phrases rang in my ears like a bell that wouldn't stop. Once I sooner or later left, the sun become low, turning the sky orange and purple. Tawanda's truck changed into gone from the parking lot. I drove home slowly, gripping the wheel difficult. Each mile felt heavier than the last. Once I walked through the wen door, the residence was quiet, besides for the sound of the television. Tawanda becomes sitting on the sofa eating chips like nothing had befell. He peered up and stated, "You took lengthy sufficient. Did you even trouble to smooth up after the provider?" I just stared at him. My thoughts become empty, my coronary heart cold. He talked for some greater mins about how dull the day have been and the way I had to pass on. I didn't answer. I went upstairs, changed out of my black get dressed, and sat on the brink of the bed. The silence in that room changed into thick, urgent against my pores and skin. I felt trapped interior it. But on the identical time, I didn't want to break it. I didn't cry. I did not scream. I just sat there observing the wall, knowing that my mom become long past. And so became the part of me that still made excuses for him. The next morning, Tawanda acted like not anything had happened. He poured his coffee, turned at the information, and requested if I deliberate to mope round all week. After I didn't solution, he laughed and said, "You were so dramatic on the funeral, Amahle. Everybody ought to see it." I stood by means of the counter, maintaining my cup, staring at the steam. I didn't consider myself to speak. He kept speaking, his voice calm, nearly bored. "She's long gone," he stated. "You want to get over it, people die. It's lifestyles." Then he grabbed his keys and left for paintings, whistling like he hadn't just ripped open a wound. For some time, I simply stood there feeling that identical emptiness once more. However, under it, something new had commenced to develop. A quiet anger that I could not push down anymore. Over the following few days, I observed small matters that didn't take a seat right. Receipts for eating places I'd in no way been to. Fuel costs in cities he never referred to traveling. One night, when he came domestic past due, I smelled a faint fragrance on his jacket. Something floral, too candy to be mine. When I asked where he'd been, he stated he became operating late at a patron's house. I didn't argue, but I didn't agree with him either. The following morning, I found a folded serviette in his denim's pocket with a lipstick stain on it. Once I held it up, he laughed. "You really want a interest," he said. "You are appearing paranoid." He snatched it out of my hand, tossed it in the trash, and delivered, "You are fortunate, I put up with this." That phrase "fortunate" stuck with me all day. I saved considering how easily he twisted the whole thing. How he made me doubt what I saw with my very own eyes. It become always my fault. I used to be too touchy, too emotional, too suspicious. That night, I lay wide awake beside him, listening to his consistent respiratory. The anger became nevertheless there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't loud anymore. It became calm, sharp, like ice forming over water. I started to word each word he stated, each lie that sounded too smooth. I began maintaining quiet notes in my mind. The time he got home, the way he prevented looking at me when I asked easy questions, the scent of perfume, the new blouse he hadn't told me about, the coins withdrawals that didn't make experience. I started keeping a small pocketbook in my handbag, pretending it became 4 grocery lists. Internal, I wrote single words, perfume, coins, late once more. Each web page felt like a step out of the fog. Whilst Tawanda checked out me, he nevertheless noticed the same obedient spouse who could forgive him no matter what. However, something in my eyes have to have modified due to the fact he stopped assembly them as often. He still had managed, but he failed to know I might sooner or later started out paying interest. And as soon as I commenced, I couldn't forestall. Weeks handed, and Amahle stored quiet, pretending the whole thing become the identical. However, inner, she had already made her desire. One morning, she packed a small bag, located her mom's old pendant around her neck, and stood in the dwelling room for the last time. The sunlight fell across the ground wherein she used to kneel, begging Tawanda to understand her. This time, there have been no tears. Tawanda walked in, amazed to see her dressed and equipped to go away. "In which are you going?" he asked, his voice sharp. Amahle looked at him evenly. "To locate the piece my mom wanted for me." He laughed in the beginning, questioning she might come lower back as she usually did. But when she walked past him, without fear, without looking back, something in his face modified. For the first time, he noticed that he had misplaced her now, not due to the fact she shouted or fought. However, because she had sooner or later chosen herself. Amahle drove to her mom's grave earlier than leaving city. She knelt beside it, laid down a small bunch of white lilies, and whispered, "You had been right, Mama. Love isn't meant to hurt. I'm free now." The wind moved lightly via the trees as if her mother became answering her. Amahle closed her eyes, smiled softly, and felt peace settle in her heart for the primary time in years. And as she walked away, the sky began to open, sunlight breaking through the clouds.